Scorpio, there's a quiet intensity in you that rarely asks to be seen, yet it fills every room you walk into, like deep water holding stories no surface can reveal. You've been carrying something lately, haven't you? A weight that doesn't shout, yet lingers in the background of your thoughts, moving through you in slow, steady waves. It shows up in small moments, the pause before you trust someone again, the way your energy pulls inward, even when you're surrounded by voices and movement. Something shifted in how you feel, how you read people, how you hold your own heart. And it didn't happen all at once. It unfolded quietly, layer by layer, until one day you realized you were standing in a different emotional landscape than before. March 24th to 25th carries that same feeling, like standing at the edge of something unseen, where the air feels just a little lighter, a little more open, even if nothing dramatic has changed yet. There's a subtle awareness rising in you, as if your inner world has been rearranging itself behind the scenes, preparing for a moment that finally meets you where you are now. What you've lived through recently wasn't loud, yet it ran deep. Moments that asked you to sit with discomfort, to feel what you usually keep hidden, to face truths that don't come with easy answers. There were times when connection felt distant, when trust felt fragile, when your own thoughts echoed louder than the outside world. And still, something in you stayed present, stayed aware, stayed open. That's where the shift begins, because what feels like an ending often carries the shape of a beginning, just not the kind that announces itself. This one grows underneath, in silence, in reflection, in the slow rebuilding of how you see yourself when no one else is watching. The parts of you that felt shaken have been reorganizing, becoming steadier, clearer, more aligned with something real. And now, there's a sense, almost impossible to explain, yet unmistakable once you feel it. Like space is opening inside you, like your breath reaches deeper, like something that once held tight is beginning to loosen its grip. If you can feel this shift already, anchor it by commenting, "I am ready to rise." Because what's unfolding here isn't just a change in circumstance, it's a transformation that has been forming beneath the surface for longer than you realize. And the moment it begins to reveal itself, carries more weight than it first appears. You may not have called it by name while you were living through it, but the pressure had a rhythm, slow, steady, almost deliberate. It showed up as delays, as weight, as moments where everything seemed to ask more from you than you felt ready to give. And still you stayed there, holding your ground in ways only you could feel. There were stretches of time where it felt like life kept tightening around the same themes. Responsibility grew heavier, emotional space felt narrower. Even simple things carried a kind of density, as if every step required more awareness, more patience, more control than before. And somewhere inside that, a quiet question kept forming. Why does it keep unfolding like this? From an astrological lens, this is where Saturn's presence becomes clear. Not loud, not chaotic, but persistent, shaping, pressing, refining. Saturn doesn't rush. It builds. It places you in situations where repetition reveals truth, where time becomes the teacher, where every experience adds structure beneath the surface of who you are becoming. You felt it in the way certain patterns kept returning, asking for a deeper response each time. The same emotional edges, the same internal reactions, the same moments where you had to choose how to hold yourself. And slowly, without needing to force it, something in you began to shift. Less reactive, more aware, more grounded in your own center. What once felt like restriction began to carry a different texture. There was strength forming there, quiet, stable, almost unshakable. The kind that doesn't need to prove itself, the kind that holds steady even when everything around you feels uncertain. This is what refinement feels like from the inside. Layers softening, patterns loosening, old ways of responding losing their grip. Not all at once, but piece by piece, until you start to recognize a version of yourself that feels more anchored than before. And maybe now, looking back at it from this distance, the weight begins to make a different kind of sense. Not as something placed against you, but as something that shaped you into a form that can hold more, see clearer, and move with intention. Because what was being built during that time wasn't visible on the surface, and what it prepared you for begins to show itself in the way your inner world starts to respond differently, especially when deeper layers begin to rise into awareness. It didn't arrive all at once. It came in waves, subtle at first. A moment where you felt ready to move forward, followed by a quiet hesitation you couldn't quite explain. You stood at the edge of decisions, of conversations, of new directions, and something inside you held still, observing, measuring, waiting. There was a part of you that wanted to trust again, to open, to step in fully. And at the same time, another part stayed alert, almost protective, scanning for what might be missed. That inner tension didn't feel chaotic. It felt precise, like two currents moving in different directions beneath the same surface. You may have noticed how your reactions began to slow down. Where there was once an immediate response, there was now a pause. A space where you could feel everything before choosing what to do with it. Emotions still moved through you, strong and real, but something deeper started to sit behind them, steady, aware. This is where the shift takes shape, because in that pause, you began to see patterns more clearly. The way certain triggers pulled at you, the way old instincts tried to take the lead. And instead of following them automatically, you started to watch. Not from distance, but from within. That awareness changed the way energy moved through you. Control, in this sense, didn't feel forceful. It felt intentional. You could feel the rise of emotion, the pull to react, and still remain grounded in something quieter, something more centered. That's where your power began to reorganize itself, not in how fast you act, but in how deeply you understand what moves you. And slowly, almost without noticing the exact moment it happened, your inner world began to feel different, less scattered, more aligned, less pulled in different directions, more rooted in a single, steady awareness. Because once you start seeing clearly within yourself, something else begins to surface. Something connected to what has been falling away and what those losses have been trying to reveal all along. There were moments you could point to, small, almost ordinary on the surface, yet something in them carried weight. A conversation that ended with a tone you couldn't unhear, a silence that stretched longer than it used to, a shift in someone's energy that told you more than their words ever could. And then, slowly, things began to fall away. Not all at once, not dramatically, just a quiet distancing. A connection that no longer held the same depth, a plan that stopped making sense, a version of the future you once felt certain about, dissolving without needing an explanation. You felt it happening even before you could fully name it. At first, it touched something tender. There was a pull to hold on, to understand, to keep the meaning intact. Because when something has lived inside you for a long time, releasing it feels like losing a part of yourself. And yet, underneath that feeling, something else was forming, something clearer. The more space that opened, the more you started to see. You began to notice what had always been there, just beneath the surface. The imbalance in certain connections, the expectations that asked you to shape yourself in ways that felt too tight, too small. The beliefs you carried that once gave you direction, but now felt out of sync with who you've become. Truth didn't arrive as a shock. It arrived as recognition. A quiet moment where everything aligned in a way that made sense, not in your mind, but in your body. You could feel it. What fits, what doesn't, what holds, what fades. And in that clarity, something inside you began to soften, even as things continued to shift. Because once truth settles in, energy begins to move differently. What felt heavy starts to lift. What felt confusing starts to organize itself. You stop reaching for what already loosened its grip, and instead, you begin to stand in the space that has opened around you. It may feel unfamiliar at first, wider, quieter, more spacious than before. And within that space, something new begins to take shape, something aligned with where you are now, something that starts to respond to a different kind of timing, especially as the energy around March 24th, 25 begins to move closer. March 24, then 25. The energy doesn't arrive all at once, it gathers, like a tide slowly turning beneath the surface, subtle at first, then undeniable once you feel the shift settle into your body. Something begins to open. You may notice it in small ways. A thought that feels lighter than usual, a decision that comes with more clarity, an emotion that moves through you without pulling you under. It's gentle, almost quiet, yet there's a sense of expansion woven into it, like space stretching in places that once felt tight. This is where Jupiter begins to move differently around you. Expansion doesn't rush in loudly, it unfolds, offering perspective, widening your vision, allowing you to see possibilities where your focus once felt narrow. What used to feel blocked starts to breathe again, and that breath carries potential. At the same time, the moon touches something deeper. Your inner tides, your instincts, your emotional awareness. You start to feel with more precision. Not overwhelmed, not scattered, but attuned. Like your inner compass has recalibrated itself, pointing you toward what aligns without needing external confirmation. And beneath it all, there's a quieter force at work. Pluto. Slow, steady, transformative. The kind of energy that doesn't just shift circumstances, but reshapes how you relate to power, to truth, to yourself. It moves through layers you don't always see, yet you can sense its presence in the way you hold your energy now. More grounded, more intentional. This moment, it's a threshold, not marked by noise or sudden change, but by a deep internal readiness. The kind that builds over time, through everything you've processed, released, understood. And now, as these energies begin to align, something responds. Opportunities, conversations, ideas, all starting to meet you where you are now. If you feel the shift, comment 777, because what's beginning here doesn't need force. It grows from alignment, from awareness, from the quiet movements inside you that are already setting the direction for what comes next, especially in the way you begin to see your own value taking shape in the world around you. It shows up in the way you look at what you give and what you receive in return. A quiet awareness begins to form, almost like stepping back and noticing the balance of energy in your life. Where you once poured freely, something in you now pauses, measures, feels into the exchange. You start to see patterns. The moments where you accepted less than what matched your effort. The spaces where your time, your attention, your presence carried weight. Yet the return felt distant, uneven, undefined. And instead of reacting to that imbalance, you begin to understand it. You begin to trace it back to something deeper. Value. Not the kind that depends on approval or recognition, but the kind that sits within you, steady and self-defined. This is where the second house begins to activate, shifting your focus from what you receive externally to what you hold internally as truth about yourself. And that shift changes everything. Because when your sense of worth stabilizes, your decisions follow. You choose differently. You respond differently. You place your energy where it aligns, where it flows, where it returns with clarity. And slowly, almost naturally, the material world begins to reflect that internal alignment. Money starts to feel different, not as pressure, not as uncertainty, but as a form of exchange, a response to the value you recognize and embody. Opportunities begin to match your frequency, your standards, your clarity. What once felt out of reach starts to move closer, not through force, but through resonance. There's a calm in this phase, a grounded confidence that doesn't need to prove itself. You know what you bring. You feel it in the way you carry yourself, in the way you choose, in the way you hold your boundaries with quiet certainty. And as that inner foundation strengthens, something else begins to rise alongside it. Something connected to how the world starts to see you, to recognize you, to respond to your presence in a much more visible way. There's a moment, it might come quietly, almost like any other day, where you notice something has shifted in how others respond to you. A conversation carries more weight, your words land differently. Someone pauses a little longer when you speak, as if they're seeing something in you that has always been there, now rising to the surface. You feel it too, not as a sudden surge, but as a steady presence within yourself. The way you hold your posture, the way you make decisions, the way you allow yourself to be seen. It all carries a different kind of certainty. This is where the energy of the 10th house begins to unfold, shaping how your inner alignment translates into the outer world. Recognition starts to take form. It may come as an opportunity, a role, a responsibility that once felt distant but now feels within reach. Someone might acknowledge your work, your consistency, your depth. And as that happens, something inside you meets it with readiness. Not surprise, but a quiet knowing. Because you've been building toward this. Every internal shift, every moment of reflection, every time you chose to align with your truth rather than external noise, it all created a foundation. And now, that foundation begins to support something more visible, more defined, more impactful. There's a natural rise happening here. You step into spaces that ask more of you, and you feel capable of holding them. You allow yourself to take up space without shrinking, without hesitation. Confidence flows from within, grounded in experience rather than expectation. And as the world reflects this back to you, it becomes clear. What you believe about yourself shapes how you are received. The outer recognition mirrors the inner decision. And with that realization settling into place, another layer begins to move beneath the surface. One connected to balance, to closure, to the quiet way life restores what once felt unresolved. It becomes clearer in hindsight, the way certain people entered your life, the roles they played, the emotions they stirred in you. At the time, it felt personal, immediate, sometimes overwhelming. Now, with a little distance, you can begin to see the pattern, the meaning woven quietly through each connection. Saturn moves through this space with precision, not to create heaviness, but to restore balance. Every interaction, every exchange, every moment that left an imprint, it all carries a kind of return. Not loud, not dramatic, but steady. Energy finding its way back into alignment, piece by piece. You may notice how your feelings toward the past begin to shift. Where there was intensity, there is now space. Where there was tightness, there is now breath. The people who once occupied so much of your inner world begin to settle into their place. Part of your story, part of your growth, no longer defining your present. There's a quiet strength in that. Because release doesn't come from force, it comes from understanding. From seeing clearly what each experience gave you, boundaries, awareness, depth. And as that clarity settles, something softens within you. The need to hold on dissolves, replaced by a sense of calm that feels grounded and real. If you are ready to release, write, "I choose peace." And in that choice, something opens. Energy that once circled around the past begins to return to you. Your focus shifts forward, your presence becomes lighter, your inner world more spacious. Peace settles in, not as something distant, but as something you carry. And from that place, a deeper transformation begins to rise within you, steady and powerful. You can feel it in the way you move through your own depth now, a familiarity with intensity, with emotion, with the quiet spaces most people try to avoid. Scorpio energy lives here, in the layers beneath the surface, where transformation doesn't announce itself, it unfolds. Slowly, completely, from the inside out. This has always been your terrain. The moments that asked you to release, to let something end, to face what felt heavy or hidden. They weren't interruptions, they were initiations. Each time something fell away, something else within you sharpened, strengthened, became more true. It may not have felt like growth while you were inside it. It felt like shedding, like standing in the middle of something dissolving without knowing what would take its place. And yet, here you are, more aware, more grounded, more connected to a deeper sense of self that doesn't rely on anything external to feel whole. That's the essence of this energy. Rebirth doesn't come from adding more, it comes from releasing what no longer belongs. Power doesn't come from control over the outside, it rises from your ability to move through your inner world with clarity and presence. Every layer you've let go of has revealed something stronger underneath, something that holds its own weight. And as that strength settles into you, it begins to guide your next steps, shaping how you act, what you choose, and where you place your energy as this new cycle starts to take form in real, tangible ways. Start with something simple. Look around your space, the corners you pass every day, the objects that quietly hold memory, the things that belong to a version of you that has already shifted. As you clear, move, release, you'll feel it, a lightness, a subtle opening, as if the air itself begins to move differently around you. Then bring your focus inward and forward. Choose one direction, just one. Let it be clear, defined, something you can see yourself stepping into over the next weeks. When your energy has a point to land on, it gathers, it strengthens, it begins to move with intention instead of drifting between possibilities. And then, extend outward. A small act, a kind word, a moment where you give without calculation. It may seem simple, almost unremarkable, yet it creates a shift in the current around you. Energy flows where it's expressed, where it's shared, where it's allowed to circulate. These steps may feel quiet, almost minimal, yet they carry weight. Because action grounds everything you've been feeling, everything you've been realizing. It brings your inner transformation into the physical world, where it can take shape, grow, and expand. And as you begin to move in these small, intentional ways, something larger starts to respond. Gently at first, then more clearly, leading you into the next phase of this unfolding path. There's a quiet moment now, where everything you've moved through begins to settle into place, not as separate pieces, but as something whole. The pressure, the questions, the releasing, it all starts to feel connected, like threads that were always leading you here, even when you couldn't see the full pattern yet. March 24th and 25 doesn't arrive as a loud turning point. It feels more like a crossing, a line you step over internally, where your awareness meets your readiness. Something in you recognizes it, not through words, but through a steady sense of alignment that feels real. You carry yourself differently now. The way you think, the way you choose, the way you hold your energy. It all reflects a deeper understanding that has taken root over time. You're no longer moving from reaction, you're moving from presence. And that presence shapes what unfolds next, in ways that feel intentional, grounded, alive. Something in you, Scorpio, has shifted into its own power. It's not something you need to prove. It's something you feel in the quiet moments, in the clarity of your decisions, in the calm way you move forward. The kind of strength that comes from knowing yourself on a level that doesn't require validation from the outside. And from here, the path opens. Not all at once, not all clearly defined, but enough for you to take the next step. Enough for you to trust the direction. enough for you to recognize that what comes next meets the version of you that stands here now, steady, aware, and ready. If this message aligns with your journey, seal it now. I step into my power. And if this moment resonates with you, you can share it. Let it reach someone who may be standing at their own threshold right now, and stay connected for what continues to unfold. Because this movement you've stepped into still has more layers waiting to reveal themselves, one step at a time.